difference there between chemical and mechanical digestion? Anybody know? So you all told me digestion just simply means what? Breakdown. What does that mean? So we're breaking down what? The foods, right? So when we say breakdown, it just means what are we doing to the food? But what's happening to the food when you chew it? It's being broken down into smaller pieces. Good. That's kind of what I wanted you all to get at. So when you chew food, you're breaking it down into smaller pieces of food, right? And as it goes through the digestive tract, it gets smaller and smaller. So the mechanical, when you see mechanical, that just means what? Right, movement. So it's the process of breaking the food down is by some mechanical stimulation, such as chewing. So your teeth grinding is considered mechanical digestion. So anything you do physically, squeezing the food, which happens as it goes through the digestive tract, all of that is mechanical digestion. So we're breaking the pieces down into smaller pieces, but they're still the same food product. Okay? So in other words, when you eat a French fry, let's take a French fry, because we all know and love French fries, right? French fries are what type of food group? And in which of the food groups? So, it's a carbohydrate, right? And we know that carbohydrates come in different forms, right? They're referred to as sugars. But some are monosaccharides, some carbohydrates are poly, some are disaccharides. And you all are going to need to know those apart as well. So when you eat a French fry, you have a polysaccharide. Starch is a polysaccharide, correct? Correct? Okay. Just making sure you all know. So starch is a polysaccharide. When you chew it, it's still a polysaccharide. It's still starch. The problem with starch is it's poly. So what the digestive system has to do is break all molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, all have to be broken down to their monomers, their building blocks. Think back to that. You all had that in 103 and 201, I'm thinking. Right? So the polysaccharide is starch. You also have glycogen, which is a polysaccharide. Disaccharides, you all know those? Any of the disaccharides? Sucrose, lactose. Okay, so those are disaccharides. And so what we said is all of these molecules have to be broken down to their simplest form. For what purpose? So why do we have to break starch down from a polysaccharide to a monosaccharide? That is digestion. The process of breaking it down is digestion. But why do we have to do that? To get the nutrients where? Okay, you're going a step too far. So from the digestive tract, what is the purpose of eating the French fries anyway? Nutrition, right? Primarily energy, right? So we eat to get energy, right? So how does the French fry go to my finger? How do the cells of my finger get energy from that French fry? Think of it in those terms. So I'm eating to get energy to my cells, right? We know what form of energy goes directly into the cells, and that's what? Glucose, thank you. So glucose from the blood goes into the cells to provide the cells the energy to make ATP. So what we're trying to do, what I want you all to think about is how does the food that we eat get to my fingers, the tissues of my fingers, the cells of my fingers and my toes and my brain. How does it get there? By what system? Circulatory system. So somehow what's in the digestive system has to make it into the circulatory system. Okay, y'all see where I am? In order for nutrients to get from the digestive system to the circulatory system, they have to be broken down to their simplest form. Okay? Starch is not in a simple form, it's a poly. So we have to get starch down to a mono. Okay? Chewing the French fry only gets starch down to starch. So really nothing has changed just by chewing. So mechanical digestion just makes the food particles smaller, but they're still the same chemical. You get my point? So if you eat a steak, what is steak high in? Protein. So the Big Mac, let's just say the beef patty. So the beef patty is high in protein. So the protein is in too large of a form. It has to be broken down to its monomer, which is what? Somebody tell me. Proteins. Proteins, what are the building blocks of proteins? Somebody saying it. Amino acids. So, you all remember amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So any food that is protein in the digestive system is going to be broken down to amino acids. Why? Proteins can't get from the digestive system to the bloodstream. Only amino acids can get from the digestive system into the bloodstream. Okay? Starch cannot get into the bloodstream. It has to be broken down to its monomers, which happen to be what? Anybody know? Monosaccharide? What's the number one monosaccharide? Monosaccharide. Sugar. What's the one that we talk about all the time in the blood? Glucose. So glucose is the number one monosaccharide. So starch, polysaccharides, and disaccharides break down to monosaccharides. The primary one is glucose. So starch breaks down to glucose. But it needs something to do that. It needs a chemical. So in order for starch to break down to a monosaccharide, glucose, it needs a chemical. In order for the beef patty protein to break down to an amino acid, it needs a chemical. And these chemicals are enzymes. Okay, so chemical digestion involves breaking food particles down to their simplest form, and that requires enzymes. I left out the N. Enzymes. So enzymes are chemicals. Well, you all know what enzymes are. They speed up reactions, but in the digestive system they're important because they convert polymers to monomers. Okay? Now, so everybody understands the difference here between mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. Mechanical is just the physical breaking down of the food into smaller pieces of food, but there's no conversion of a chemical from one form to a different chemical. In order to do that, you need enzymes, so that's chemical digestion. Okay, and then, so now let me ask you again, why do we need to break those food particles down to their simplest form? So they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. So that process is called absorption. Okay? So the breakdown of chemicals, the food chemicals to their simplest form is called digestion. Mechanical digestion breaks those particles down to smaller particles, and chemical digestion converts them to a form that can be absorbed. Okay? Now, so we mentioned those processes: ingestion, then digestion, and absorption. Okay? Those are the primary activities or functions of the digestive system: ingestion, digestion, absorption, elimination. Alright, what I wanted to mention here is those molecules that have to be broken down. And let's look at the carbs first, because they're more complex here. So the carbs that we consume, give me some foods that are rich in carbohydrates, primarily carbs. Potatoes, corn, and I just say any veggie. All veggies. Yes. If you think about it, let me spell that again. Yep. So if you think of it, that foods fall into 3 categories: high in carbs, lipids, or proteins. Proteins are your meats. Lipids are meats too, but those that are fatty, and everything else is a carb. Okay, so there are things called good carbs and bad carbs, I guess. Okay, so all veggies, all fruit. Okay, breads, pasta, right? So most of the foods we eat are carbohydrates. They come from some type of organism, right? Plants. Whereas most of the protein and lipids that we consume come from animals, other animals. Alright, so carbs. And let's see, ice cream. I didn't put up here all the bad carbs. I guess sweets, anything sweet is a carbohydrate. Juices, cereals. So all of those fall under carbs. And as we said, the meats, fish, chicken, poultry, all of those are rich in protein as well as different types of lipids. Okay, so let's look at the monosaccharides. So for the test, you'll need to know the monosaccharides. And the main one we said is what? The main monosaccharide is glucose. And then there are 2 others. Fructose galactose. So these are the 3 you need to know for the test. You also have, remember, ribose and deoxyribose found in DNA and RNA. Those are also monosaccharides. So these are the simple sugars. Okay? And so since they are simple sugars, let's put them in the category as important, because these are the ones that can what? Be absorbed into the bloodstream. Okay, so what about the disaccharides? The disaccharides are M, is L. Finish those off for me. M is maltose. Good. Maltose. Sucrose. And lactose. So why are these considered disaccharides? Two sugars. So they're made of two monosaccharides. So if you have a maltose molecule, it's made up of two monosaccharides. And you should know which two. So maltose is made from two glucose molecules. So glucose plus glucose, if two glucose molecules form a covalent bond between each other, they form one maltose. Sucrose is made from fructose plus glucose. Okay, so a fructose and glucose molecule bond, they form one sucrose. And lactose is made from one glucose molecule plus one galactose molecule. Okay, so glucose, we kind of set them up so you can see which ones are formed. So basically you just add a glucose to each of those monosaccharides and you get the adjacent disaccharide. Okay, maltose, sucrose, and lactose. And we did mention starch. Starch would be over there somewhere as a polysaccharide made up of many units of glucose. Okay, so many units of glucose. First, many units of maltose. And since maltose is made of many units of glucose, that is the foundation of starch. Glycogen is another polysaccharide made up of many repeating units of glucose, just in a different arrangement. And so those are the ones you need to focus on. Another polysaccharide, I don't think I can reach that far. So we had starch, glycogen, and cellulose. And you all may even remember chitin, the exoskeleton of insects like roaches, crabs. Starch, glycogen, and cellulose are the ones that we have in our diet, though. Well, some people eat cockroaches, I guess. So. But so starch and glycogen is broken down to glucose in our digestive system. Cellulose is a very important part of our diet. It's a polysaccharide, but it cannot be broken down because we don't have an enzyme to break cellulose down to a monosaccharide. But it's still known to be very good for the diet. Does that make any sense? So if it can't be broken down, how can it be important? So we know it can't get sent into the bloodstream. So that means what happens to it? So it just keeps going through. So cellulose is considered fiber. Because I wanted you all to think about it. So most of what we eat, we're eating to get energy from it, so that would mean it has to get into the bloodstream. Cellulose cannot be broken down, so it stays in the digestive tract and pushes everything else out. Okay, all of the poisons that develop. So we also have bacteria, good bacteria in our digestive tract, and bacteria act on certain molecules as they stay in the digestive tract. So it's not good for those, especially protein, to stay in the colon, because the bacteria act on it and produce chemicals that are known to cause cancer, colon cancer. So it's good to have fiber to make sure things are pushed through before the bacteria have a lot of time to act on it and cause those chemicals that do harm. Now, so tell me something about lactose intolerance. Looking at this picture here, so lactose, so we know lactose is a what? It's a disaccharide. So people who are lactose intolerant have what issue? Very good. So what happens is anything we consume that has maltose, such as beer, we hear of malt liquor. So maltose is beer sugar, and so in order for the molecules to get sent into the bloodstream to be absorbed, maltose has to be broken down to glucose and glucose. So there's an enzyme necessary for that, and that enzyme is called maltase. So maltase, notice most of the enzymes end in ASE. Maltase breaks maltose down to glucose. What breaks down sucrose? Sucrase, good. So sucrase breaks down sucrose to what? Fructose and glucose. Okay? And those are sent on into the bloodstream. And sucrose is what type of sugar? It's a disaccharide, but in what food? It's sugar. Cane sugar, white sugar. White sugar is sucrose. So, sucrase breaks it down in our digestive system, and then lactose is broken down by the enzyme lactase. Good. Okay, so we have lactase in our digestive tract, and it's going to break down the lactose to the lactose and glucose, so those molecules are able to be sent into the bloodstream. So people who are lactose intolerant are probably lacking what? Lactase. So the lactase is either absent or in very low quantities, so that the body is unable to break it down effectively. So most of the lactose just continues on through the digestive tract, and the bacteria like it. The bacteria like the lactose, and they start producing gaseous molecules that kind of give you the blues if you have that issue, causing bloating and discomfort. So that's due to, yes, usually like lactate. Yeah, that's all it is. The enzyme, providing the enzyme. Okay. Now, so the protein is easy. So you all should know what the carbs break down to. You will have questions on there asking you what breaks them down. And I didn't mention what breaks down starch. That one polysaccharide you do need to know the name of the enzyme. And it's a weird one. It's not starchase. So starch is broken down by, somebody have it? Right, it's called amylase. Amylase is the enzyme that breaks down starch. And pancreatic amylase is amylase that is produced by the pancreas. We also have salivary amylase, which is produced by salivary glands. hmm So what are they detecting if they have those enzymes? Yeah. So lipase is the enzyme that breaks down what? Lipids. Good. Yeah. So lipids, and as you all told me, what types of foods are high in lipids? Bacon. Bacon is almost nothing but lipid, right? Ugh. And yes, it is very good. But when you think about what it does to you, not good. So lipids, bacon, butter, what else? Chicken skin. The skin is pretty much all lipid under there. Subcutaneous fat. Anything greasy, oil shortening, right? Anything you fry is high in lipid, right? Because you're frying it. You're not frying it in water, are you? So you're frying it in lipids. Okay, so even if you have chicken breasts, are supposed to be so healthy, but you got to take the skin off, and then you have just about all protein. But if you find a way to fry it, you just defeat the purpose, right, of taking the skin off, because you're adding fat to it. So lipids, you should know what lipids are broken down to. So lipids are broken down to fatty acid, and glycerol. So these are the monomers that can be absorbed into the bloodstream. So any fat that we eat has to be broken down to these before they can be sent into the bloodstream. I remember there was something people could take that would prevent the lipids from being broken down. I forgot what it was. A certain type of potato chip, I think they said. And so what happened is you don't get the bad effects of consuming too much lipid, because it goes straight through the body. I don't think that's on the market anymore. It must have been something. Exactly. That's definitely going to happen because the lipids keep going through. Right. But I guess the thing that people are thinking about is not gaining weight, because you can't gain weight from fat if it doesn't get in your bloodstream. Right. So it has to get into your. But something must have been wrong with it, I'm thinking, because it just went straight through. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, okay. So you know that for a fact, or okay? Do you? Okay. Okay. I just wanted you to confirm. I remember hearing something about it, but I never knew why it was gone. Okay. Then it makes sense. Okay, and protein. So protein, as we said, the meats that we consume are broken down to what? Amino acids. So the amino acids are able to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, what we'll see is that lipids are broken down by, as you all just said, the enzyme lipase. Proteins are broken down by, there's a couple of enzymes, and these don't end in ASE. Pepsin, trypsin, and there's one called chymotrypsin. And then you have peptidases. That's one that ends in S. Pep. Remember what a peptide is? Polypeptide is a long string of amino acids. So peptidases break down those polypeptide chains. Okay. Now, so the main part that you all can do now at this point is go through the path of food. So you have another path. So the path of food, you all know that? And I'm not going to go over all this. But what you're going to need to know for the test is that the path of food through the digestive tract, what is happening to the foods at each part of the path? Is there a digestive enzyme? If so, what is it and what is it breaking down at that point? And what you all will find is in the mouth, the oral cavity, there's amylase, salivary amylase. So what food starts to be broken down the earliest, and that would be starch. Starch is a carbohydrate. So you may see a question like that on the test. Which food group, proteins, carbs, or lipids, start being broken down in the mouth? Well, in the mouth you only have active salivary amylase. You do have something called lipase, but it's not activated. So you just have salivary amylase. You don't have any of the enzymes that break down proteins. Okay? Once you get to the stomach, you're going to have the breakdown of proteins because you have pepsin. So pepsin is an enzyme found in the stomach, and it starts to break down proteins. Okay? One other thing about the stomach is that it also has an acid. What's the acid there? Hydrochloric acid, right. So hydrochloric acid is necessary to form pepsin. So pepsin cannot be formed. Actually, pepsin is in an inactive form before hydrochloric acid acts on it. It's something called pepsinogen. Pepsinogen is inactive pepsin. So pepsinogen has to combine with hydrochloric acid in order to form pepsin. So you can think of hydrochloric acid as being important in activating the enzyme that breaks down protein in the stomach. Okay? And then, so most of the enzymes we're going to find in the small intestine. That's where most of the chemical digestion takes place. In the small intestine. Also, that's where most of the absorption takes place in the small intestine. Okay?